you, Blayne Smith. Don't let the smack it down on my candy ass. We got Blayne Smith in the comments. We got Blayne right here with us.
Hey.
Blayne, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm blessed, man. Fantastic. I appreciate you having me on, Blake.
I got to go here first, okay? I know you're a Georgia guy. I know you're in the Georgia area, but I got to tell you this as I see the thumbs up here. Look, Blayne, people want to save money, right? I mean, come on.
That's it.
Georgia got a big running back commit today. Now, normally we talk about LSU, but when I saw this Branson kid and I saw the kid's legs and I saw the kid's arms, I mean, no way that kid's 18, right? Like, that kid's got to be 46. Like, he's Herschel Walker at 17 years old. Talk about that and talk about, was Georgia really leaning, or I think Alabama looked like they wanted him and they thought they were going to get him. But talk about him and his commitment today.
I mean, with Branson Robinson, he's a player that Georgia has felt really, really good about for a long time. And when it comes down to it, it seems like that Branson Robinson had made up his mind actually a long way ago in this process, but he ended up kind of going through the motions. Alabama did get a little bit of a run there with an official visit for him. He also went up to Tennessee for an official visit. But at the end of the day, I think everybody is one of the worst kept secrets, out there, that Branson Robinson was going to be a Georgia Bulldog. And you're absolutely right. There's so many comparisons out there between Branson Robinson and Nick Chubb. I mean, he is almost a Nick Chubb clone in how physical he is, how strong he is, the running style. So Georgia definitely got a good one, the Rivals' #1 ranked running back in the class of 2022.
Blayne, that's interesting because, look, Georgia has not been shy of getting good running backs. It's going to be interesting to see how they do in this new offense. It's going to be interesting to see how they incorporate the running backs that they have now, but I think it's good that they got him. All right, so we brought you on. I'm not going to bore our fans about some recruiting, like Alabama, but I want to talk to you from an LSU perspective, right? We'll get to some other things, but look, LSU has shown that Louisiana just has a lot of good athletic guys and a lot of freaks in this class. Blayne, talk about this. Do you think, because it's easy for us in Louisiana to say, oh, they're the best class in the country, but when you look at this roster, when you look at this recruiting, Blayne, is that one of the top 3 classes in 2022? Can you see them and Ed Orgeron landing a top 3 class at the end of the year?
I can see them being top 3 all the way maybe towards the end, and it's just going to depend on a couple of key battles towards signing day. But between now and December, that early signing day, I fully expect LSU to be right up there, 2, 3, 4 in the country. But there's teams out there that are heavy loading their classes early. They're going to skew this, like Penn State, for example, who just picked up Denied Dennis Sutton over Georgia and over Alabama today. They won out. James Franklin's doing a tremendous job. Penn State, I think, is #2 in the country now, and you got Ohio State that's recruiting really well. So, but LSU is going to be right there. It's just some key battles, and I'm sure we'll get into those.
So let's go right there. Let's talk about some of the key battles. Look, Sean Murphy is a guy that's training LSU. There's a couple of guys that either is going to go to Florida, Alabama, LSU. Let's start with Sean Murphy. What are you hearing about him? What do you think about him? Is it going to be Alabama, LSU, or Florida trending right now, in your opinion?
Well, LSU, probably if this was 2 weeks ago, I would say LSU would be the place that Sean Murphy ended up, because I think that, after his visit there, he was gaining a lot of forecast, all this kind of stuff to LSU. Actually, there was a lot of hype around him. He had a great time there in Baton Rouge. But Sean Murphy is a young man who is very cerebral, very intellectual type at the linebacker position. And I think some of that talk maybe with Nick Saban is intriguing him a little bit there. Because when Saban talks about football with these kids, they get like mesmerized. Then you go with Ed Orgeron, and I don't know if you've heard of Christian Miller, a defensive tackle out of Georgia. Christian Miller does one of the best Ed Orgeron's impressions out there. So you need to just have him on your show just for that, whether he goes to LSU or not one day. But, in terms of Sean Murphy, I think LSU is right there neck and neck with Alabama for that linebacker. That's somebody who Georgia would have loved to have in this class, because he is the prototypical inside linebacker type in this class. But Sean Murphy is definitely someone out of Manassas, Virginia, that is a strong prospect in the class of 2022. But I think, Blake, when you talk about some big battles there, you're talking about like Kamari Wilson. Okay. Kamari Wilson, he was virtually a Georgia lock as of a month ago. LSU has made this thing a absolute just drag out fight. I mean, LSU and Miami and Florida have really risen, but LSU in particular, with the way they've recruited him, the NIL pitches, all that kind of stuff, the NILSU, that's a powerful image. What they were doing on Times Square the day that NIL came out, Kamari Wilson is right there in the mix of things with LSU as well.
You bring up an interesting point, Blayne, in reference to NIL and just how things started to shift, right? When camps started happening. I remember what happened here locally when LSU started holding football camps. Do you think it's as simple as LSU, Georgia, Alabama, and all these teams started seeing kids in person, and then maybe they started trending? Maybe for Wilson, for an example, LSU started trending because they saw him and they wanted him more. Do you think because of that, that's why you've seen some kids start to flip? You talk about Sean Murphy 2 weeks ago, maybe a lock to LSU. Now it could be Alabama. Do you think it's because maybe these schools are seeing kids and putting the full court press after seeing them?
I just think it's the simple fact that you had guys go so long. This class of 2022, in my opinion, is the most impacted class ever, and the most different recruiting class ever because of the COVID impact. Because people got to realize, in the end of your sophomore year going into your junior year, that's like prime recruiting time. That is where things are taken this serious. That's where the best evaluations take place. And these kids were robbed of that. They didn't have that. It was all through Zoom. So now here comes the month of June, and it's like a cattle run, just getting thousands of prospects through. And I'm not exaggerating, thousands. Georgia had over 2,500 prospects, I think, in the month of June come through, and that's across 4, 5, 6 classes. It's a lot of stuff. But with a guy like Sean Murphy, there's that initial official visit high, and then things come down a little bit. So it's kind of the ebb and flow,
Yeah, and that's an interesting point and a good way to characterize it, right? Like, you go somewhere, you get all fired up, and then a couple weeks go by, and you're just like, yeah, whatever. Like you go on a church trip.
Church camp is exactly what I was about to say.
Camp. Yeah, it's church camp, man. Like, yeah, and then all you come back and you got a homework, and you're like, man, what's this shit? It just is what it is. Blayne Gilmer is our guest. We'll let you guys know everywhere you can catch all of his stuff. Partner with us and a good friend of ours over at the Bleav Podcast Network. Blayne, is there somebody? I know that Emory Jones is a guy that's an offensive lineman that everybody knows that and feels that he's going to be committing. By the way, I think he's one of the best interior linemen in this class. Everybody knows that it's going to be him. But is there somebody that you talked about, Wilson? But is there somebody that you're looking that might be trending for LSU and what you see and what you hear that maybe is a little off the radar? Is there somebody that's uncommitted that you think LSU is going to be able to pull that maybe nobody's talking about?
I don't know so much about nobody's talking about them because I'm not every day in the LSU circles, but I do know some guys that I think are just fait accompli to end up at LSU are some Louisiana guys like Jamon Tapp, like Shaz Preston. Right. LSU, in my opinion, does a better job of anybody than locking down the guys that need to stay in their state. More so than the state of Georgia, more so than Texas, more so than Florida, because LSU, if you're a football player, if you're a guy who can don the gold and purple there, you're going to end up in Baton Rouge. I mean, that's the simple. People are talking about Jaden Osbury, the 2023 class. They're like, oh, he dropped the top 10. I'm like, it does not matter. He goes to University Lab High School. Hell, he's going to end up at LSU.
And his dad works in the AD office. I mean, like, come on, man.
I'm like, why are we covering his top 10? It doesn't matter. He's going to LSU. Because that's how it all goes. I mean, Ed Orgeron has really brought that back. I think there was a lull in that maybe for just a couple of classes. But Ed Orgeron and the pride that he has in the state of Louisiana and kind of feels like, a part of it there. I really think that, he's running around campus with his shirt off, doing all kinds of stuff, waving to people. Who wouldn't want to go play for a guy like Ed Orgeron there at LSU?
Yeah, you know what's crazy about that? People get mad at him because after 5-5, he runs around with his shirt out and his titty nipples are pointing everywhere. You know, people getting mad about it, Blayne. But look, I think they're going to be fine. We do have some fan questions in here. Brandon Reese asks, #Ask Blayne, how do you feel about Oklahoma and Texas joining the SEC? I know that it was a point that we were going to talk about. We'll you know what? We'll table that one, Blayne. We'll come back to that one at the end. Craig Schilling, who's a guy that lives in Georgia, big LSU fan, says, #Ask Blayne, Kirby seemed to be the perfect fit for UGA. Why hasn't he been able to get them to the playoffs again? And I think it's something interesting that you just mentioned, and I'm going to ask you if you think that this could be a part of it. Look, I am the president and CEO of the Jay Ward fan club now that he's moved to safety. A kid from Georgia, BJ Ojolari, another kid from Georgia. Look, Eric Gilbert, call it what it was. He's in Georgia now, but they were able to get him out of the state of Georgia. You talk about that. Is that maybe a reason why Kirby maybe losing some of those recruiting battles hasn't gone to the playoff? Or do you think it's more fundamental? Do you think it's more offensively and maybe some schematic stuff? Because look, Blayne, they're having great recruiting classes. It's not like they're not. Do you think that that's a part of it? But what do you think the issue is there?
What was the name? Oh, Craig.
Yeah.
2 words. Nick Saban. That's the reason. If it were not for Nick Saban, then Georgia would probably have 2 national championships right now. Am I wrong? They would probably have 2 national. They would have if they could have gotten over the hump in 2017. They would beat Nick Saban. They don't choke and play cover 2 and overtime. Second and 26. If they don't do that, national champions. Tell me a team that was playing better than the Georgia Bulldogs the next year when they lose, when Jalen Hurts comes in and beats them off the bench. So those 2 years in a row right there. And then they go to the SEC championship game the next year and get waxed by, in my opinion, the greatest single season college quarterback ever, Joe Burrow. That's the greatest college football season that's ever been put on record. He was just magic that year. I hope that Burrow comes back healthy and just does his thing for Cincinnati this year. But that's simply it. It's that Nick Saban, and then they ran into the buzzsaw of LSU in 2019. But you're talking about, other than Alabama and then maybe Clemson, because it's hard to say Clemson because Clemson is in the terrible ACC that's just not even close to the same level of competition. Georgia, Alabama, LSU, those are the best 3 programs year in and year out in the country if you just take into account what they're able to do over the last 3 or 4 years.
Side note to that, do you think he opens the offense up? I mean, he's got to. I mean, look, I don't mean this in a wrong way, but you got JT. Now's the time, brother. Like, I'm tired. And look, I'm not even a Georgia fan, but just sometimes to me, Blayne, incompetence. And I'm not calling him Les Miles by any means, but it has that feel. We're going to run the football. We're going to play good defense. Blayne, you can't do that anymore. But do you think this is the time that Kirby finally opens it up and just lets it rip?
Let me tell you something here for LSU fans. LSU fans should have known that the plan in Kirby's mind to change this offense came when Jermaine Burton didn't go to LSU. When Jermaine Burton didn't go to LSU, that was Kirby throwing it down and saying, I want to change this offense. And here's what happened. COVID happened. If COVID-19 does not happen, if Georgia has a full spring practice under Todd Monken and is able to really get a full regular offseason, that offense changes last year. But people have to remember, COVID, walk-on quarterback for the first 6 games of the season.
God bless us.
Excuse me. Walk-on came in and saved their butt after Dwan Mathis crapped it down his leg against Arkansas. And there's that hilarious meme out there of Kirby with his headset, like looking at Dwan, like, can you handle this moment right now? And
can you throw a forward pass, son? Can you throw a forward pass?
It was crazy, but I agree with you. This offense, in my opinion, this offense is going to be one of the top 3-4 offenses in the country this year because they have Eric Gilbert at wide receiver. He's going to play wide receiver, by the way. They have Jermaine Burton, so you got those on the stacks. Basically, LeBron James at tight end in Darnell Washington. The guy's 6'8", 260 pounds, and runs like a deer. Great. And then the stable of running backs. What Georgia has to do, and they've got the quarterback, like you mentioned, what Georgia has to do is they have to be able to put it together on the line of scrimmage, just consistency wise. But here's the thing. This offense is going to look better because they don't play Alabama, they don't play LSU, and they don't play Texas A&M. So, if they get past that Clemson game, who's going to beat them?
I'm not going to pick a team, but I worry for Georgia sometimes, like a South Carolina comes up and beats them, right? I mean, look, that was a Les Miles thing. Like you're trailing at halftime by 3 to Rudy Poo University. Like that's the kind of stuff that I put into it. But we'll just have to wait and see there. I want to get to one more recruiting question, and I really want to get in this too with you, the Texas-Oklahoma scenario of coming into the SEC. Blayne, I don't know how else to put this other than for a long time, we've talked about Les a little bit here in the recruiting class. They're always top 5, but I don't think that they were good recruiting classes, right? Like they never went and got the good O-linemen. They got some defensive linemen, but it was just kind of more sporadic. Ed has come in here and had a very diverse class, but the one thing that he's done really good is go get guys in the transfer portal and really go get good quarterbacks. We've seen that.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think it's as simple, Blayne, is just hitting on the quarterback? Like you can go get the good pieces. You can go get the good wide receivers, O-linemen, D-linemen, but if you hit on that guy that's going to be under center in college football, it seems that for so long it's been that simple. If you get that guy, you're going to win a lot of football games. Or is it a little bit more to that? I mean, I get that it's more to that, but it just seems like those top guys at the quarterback position are just always bringing their teams to the playoff. Do you think that is what has separated teams like Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Clemson, Ohio State versus all the others because they have that guy?
I mean, it's not just in the college ranks. I mean, look what happened. Tom Brady leaves New England, and magically New England's terrible, and Tampa Bay wins the Super Bowl. I mean,
right. Well, it's a torn ACL, by the way.
Yeah, it's a quarterback-driven sport, and when Joe Burrow did what he did at LSU, then it was game, set, and match. There was no one that was going to beat that team. It's because once you have a quarterback that's playing with that much confidence and that much swag, and then they go out and they're doing their thing, it makes everybody else's. It's like a pitcher in baseball that's dealing and able to just have pinpoint command of his pitches. Everybody's playing with that confidence, and the defensive level raises around them. Same thing at the quarterback position. But I agree with you. That is part of it. But I also think part of it is simply, and people aren't going to like this answer, it's simply that you have to have some things go your way in the SEC. Yep. I mean, it's a game where there has to be some things that bounce your way in these games, because you talk about the margins between a Georgia, LSU, and Alabama. It's razor thin. They all have 4 and 5 stars, just creatures just walking the field out there. It's unbelievable. The talent level that these guys have, but you have to have things go your way. You have to have the quarterback. And I think what you mentioned earlier, I heard you talking before I came on, you have to have some schematic advantages, just slight schematic advantages with guys like, Mangus that's coming back on board with right. Joe Brady that year. I mean, there's just certain little things that you can take advantage of and put your athletes that are the same level of athlete that the other team has in just a slight better percentage chance to have success. And that makes all the difference in the world.
Well, like Devontae Smith in the national title game, they found a schematic way that they could get him lined up with a linebacker. I mean, it's like you talk about that, the smaller things, and then it blows up. I really want to get to this though, but I do have
one thing on that before you. One thing I was going to say. Did you know that Devontae Smith caught 47 of his 120 passes last year behind the line of scrimmage?
I did. Yeah, because Blayne, my mom taught at Amite Westside, and one of her students, Devontae Smith. So we were and we're right here in Hammond. Amite's literally a stone's throw away.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's nuts, man. Like how crazy. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 58 catches. What was it? I think 37 of the 58 catches behind the line of scrimmage, and then all the yards. I mean, that kind of stuff, putting your playmakers in space, right? That's what you talk about. Get the mismatch advantages, and I think that you would succeed. But it's going to be interesting. And Chris Barnhill says, and one of my favorite players in LSU too, Max Johnson's a Georgia kid too.
So is Jake Johnson.
Right. Well, that's another one, dude. By the way, he's a freak, dude.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we watched him at the LSU camp, dude. Jesus, Mary and Joseph. Thank you. Hey, Georgia, thank you.
Well, it's funny.
How.
I had texted Georgia's source early on in his recruitment and be like, "Hey, how do you feel about Jake Johnson? What's going on?" They were like, "Oh, we'd love to have him, but LSU done deal." This was like months before he committed, so they knew it was coming.
All right, I want to get to this one question, then we'll get there. We're going to get there, but this is the last one because it's a fan question. My good friend Roderick says, #AskBlayne, do you believe LSU will have a top 5 offense this season? I'll go first on this one, give a little take on it. Look, I do think Blayne this week showed us that no one's really respecting LSU and SEC media days. They returned their entire offensive line. People have worried about that, but I don't worry about it because, look, these guys have experience. Austin Deculus is a guy that's going to break the LSU record this year for the most consecutive starts. That's unbelievable and unheard of in today's day and age when you have so many guys that leave for the NFL. I think they got good wide receivers. They do. Look, Miles Brennan, as much as I've got on his ass, he has shown that he can light you up at times. Max Johnson's another one. Now that they're bringing in Jake Peets, who was instrumental in the RPO game in Alabama, then goes with Joe Brady, and then comes here with DJ Mangus, there are a lot of feels of that 2019. But what do you think? Do you think that they can get in that top 5 of top offenses?
The only reason I would hedge my bet against it in terms of, is he talking about top 5 SEC, or is he talking about top 5 in the country? Because if he's talking top 5 he's talking top 5 in the country, but that's just hard for any SEC team, in my opinion, because the competition elsewhere is so tough. Clemson's guaranteed to be in it because they're just going to buzzsaw through everybody over there. Right. Ohio State, same thing in the Big Ten. I don't think anybody's going to challenge them. CJ Stroud's going to have a monster year over there.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I'm sure there's going to be some teams out west where no defense is played at all, where it's just skews the numbers. But I agree with you. LSU is going to be, I would say, definitely a top 10 offense in the country. I think Georgia and LSU both find their way up in there, honestly, because I think both of these teams are going to really take steps forward. My question to you is, have you thrown down your gauntlet yet and said, is it going to be Miles Brennan or Max Johnson?
Oh, no doubt. Max Johnson all day. I mean, not even Blayne, not even the gauntlet. I have I put the gauntlet down with Thor's hammer on that son of a bitch so it won't come off, right? Dude, with the RPO game, period. Mm-hmm. 3 letters, RPO. That is why it will be Max Johnson and should be Max Johnson. Now, do they start Miles Brennan at UCLA because they don't want him to transfer? I don't know all that. But at the end of the day, what I saw that kid do against Florida, look, say what you want about Florida's defense last year, and I get that. But LSU had 46 scholarship players that were on that team, on that field last year. Oh, well, Kyle Pitts didn't play. Well, they had 46 scholarship players, Blayne, and they went out there and won. I get the Marco Wilson shoe throw, but one play in a 60-minute game, to me, this is my take, never makes a game. Why didn't you stop the 300 yards passing before? I just think Max Johnson is light years ahead. He's not just maybe not from an arm strength perspective, but from running with his feet. I just think he's so good at being mobile. But that's me. We got to get to this, Blayne. We just absolutely have to. Texas and Oklahoma, right? I'm going to give you the floor on this one. I'm going to let you go, and then we're going to talk about it, and we're going to get into some depth here. Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? What says you?
I like it in terms of, I always like more competition. I think whether it's free market stuff in business, or I think football, whatever, I think the more competition, the better. However, I think that to that end, I like it as long as the SEC would be willing to maybe cut the wheat from the chaff with some other schools and get rid of a Vandy or a Missouri or somewhere like that. Encourage them to maybe go join the AAC or the ACC, something along those lines, because I think you got iconic brands there in Texas and Oklahoma that could make for some huge matchups. Get rid of the divisions, just play best on best, and let's go at it. I mean, think how great college football could be if those lines are thrown away. You don't have to worry about who cares if Texas A&M and South Carolina play every year? That's not a natural rivalry, all that kind of stuff. Let's just play everybody, get this rotating schedule, 9 conference games maybe. I'm all good with that. But let's just I would say I'm good with it if they're willing to consider maybe pushing some other teams out, honestly, because I think 16 teams is just crazy.
From a baseball perspective, I want them to push Vandy out.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. I don't know, Blayne, if they would push
they
those
won't.
teams, but here's my thing. I don't know if you saw this today, but the SEC Network talked about the 4 different pods. Dude, I hate that. Okay, because
terrible.
Like, even if it's 4-3, let's say hypothetically you have 3 teams from those 3 pods that end up with the same record. Let's just say, for example, Alabama, LSU, and Georgia. For argument's sake, I'm not saying it will, but LSU, Alabama, and Georgia are in those 3 pods, all have the same record. What do you do then? So are you going to allow a committee for an SEC title game? Like, how are you going to go about naming an SEC who should be in the SEC title game? Because we're not talking about East and West at that point. There is no central division. I don't think, Blayne, that they will do that. I think that they split it down the middle. I don't know what Alabama will do if they put them in the East, the quote-unquote East. I just don't know what they will do. But I do think that they would like playing Vandy every year, Tennessee. They do already play Tennessee every year, Kentucky every year, because of the reasons they don't have to play LSU every year. They don't have to play Texas A&M every year. I think that they would like that. My whole thing with all of this is that it worries me to the extent of how does it affect college football, right? Like, you're not going to have an Oklahoma that's going to come out of the Big 12 and get beat down in the playoff game. Like, I don't know how it's going to affect, but today they don't go to the ADs and presidents meeting. Texas and Oklahoma are the only 2 that's out, and it worries me what's going to happen there. But here's what I love, Blayne. In 2019, LSU went to Austin to play Texas, and they put us in the nosebleed.
Yeah.
Not only did they put us in the nosebleed, they blew a cannon through a number 9 jersey. If you don't know, in Louisiana, that man walks on water. And also, they did not have the air condition on pregame, and that's why LSU players were going out there and throwing water on them because it was 104 degrees inside the locker room. I want Texas in the SEC for 5, 6, 7 years so we can beat the shit out of them. Georgia, Bama, LSU, A&M, I just want it to happen. I want to shut them up. However, and I'm going to turn this question over to you, when we talk about a branding point, though, it is Oklahoma, regardless of how much we may trash them, myself included. It is Oklahoma. It is Texas. Does this stamp I'm not going to say forever, but does this stamp the SEC being the best conference maybe in all sports moving forward?
Just the fact that Texas and Oklahoma are considering it lets you know that they are conceding that the SEC is the best conference in all of sports, regardless.
Right.
Because I'm just telling you that's why they want to be a part of it. One, the almighty dollar is driving this. There's so much money, more money out there to be made. If Texas and Oklahoma are a part of the SEC, the revenue split will be unbelievable, even more so than it is right now. TV deals, all that kind of stuff. But let me tell you something that's going to happen, in my opinion. If you get these major power conferences, let's say Texas and Oklahoma leave the Big 12. Well, the Big 12 is going to disintegrate and they're going to splinter off it's going to become these 4 or 5 power conferences of 16, teams, things like that. And conference championships are going to be gone. There will be no more conference championships because they're already going to expand the playoff to 12 teams. And then after that, it'll probably go to 16. So there's only so many weeks in the year, and they're not going to have time for that SEC championship game or whatever conference they want to call it ultimately, however they do all that kind of stuff. But I just think the conference championships are going to be gone. Playoffs are going to be expanded. But I think ultimately what you're going to get to see is a more free-flowing game. It is already like Georgia is already has Texas and Oklahoma scheduled within the next 10 years regardless. So it'll change a lot of those things in terms of scheduling. But I think you're just going to see a trend towards more of almost an NFL style of play.
That's interesting. You bring it up with the NFL style of play too, because I agree with you. Like Georgia's going to play Clemson, LSU play Texas. Those are iconic brands, Blayne, that meet and they clash together. Hey, what if there's a kid in recruiting that's going to pick between Clemson or Georgia? And that game, I know games don't sway kids. I know people say that all the time. I think that that's bullshit. But what if Georgia goes into Clemson, or what if they meet? I'm not literally Clemson, but what if they beat the dog shit out of them, right? Like that to me is something I want to see. I don't want to wait what it'd be, 4.5 months to watch that game. I want to see LSU go to UCLA. I want to save my money and during the year and want to go to LA. I agree with you there. I want to be able to do that, and I don't know if they will be able to do that. A couple more on this, Blayne. I'll get you out of here. You've been fantastic. How would because you're recruiting, how would the landscape and recruiting change? I know that it changed for A&M. I mean, look at what they were doing before they got into the SEC to what they're doing now. And I know that it's Jimbo, but Kevin Sumlin had some good recruiting classes in there too. Got guys like Johnny Manziel, Speedy Noel in those classes. How much does this affect recruiting? Can LSU now go back into Texas because you have two Texas schools? What do you think happens there? And maybe just a landscape. Do you think it affects it that much?
I don't think recruiting is where you're going to see this be a big deal when it comes to these power conferences being made and stuff like that. I think recruiting is already a cutthroat sport as it is, in terms of it's its own sport, in my opinion. There's different things that go on, and everybody knows all the stories. But what I'm telling you, this is going to make a difference is that transfer portal when it comes to the 1 year rule being in play. Everybody can immediately, you can do a one-time transfer, immediately eligible. So what's going to happen is people are going to see, okay, University of Georgia, they're losing a quarterback. They have a bunch of freshmen maybe the next year. I'll just go over to Georgia and play quarterback. Or LSU needs a number one wide receiver. I've been really productive during my career over here at Kansas State or something like that. I'll just go be LSU's number one. You know what I'm saying? Like if there's an All-American somewhere at a maybe lesser program that has one more year eligibility and wants to go win a natty, they're going to go to an Alabama or a LSU or a Georgia and be that integral piece. I'm telling. Rick Gilbert.
I didn't really think about the transfer portal, like in reference to this, and I hadn't really thought about it too much. You know what? Let's end here because I've got a question for you. People call me nuts, Blayne, about the portal, right? Here's my reasoning. There's over 130,000 kids that play D1 football, but there's only 1,100 kids in the portal. Is the transfer portal a bigger deal than we're making it, right? So when I look at 1,100 divided by 135,000 kids, and I'm like, we're not even at 1%. Am I crazy to think that it's not a bigger deal than what we're making it, or is it a bigger deal in your mind and it's something that we should continue to monitor moving forward?
Well, the only reason I think it's a big deal is because, yes, it's only 1%, but it's how does that 1% fit on these rosters? Because once somebody leaves, it's very, very rare that a team's going to take them back. And then once that team, says, okay, you're off on your own, what if that young man or that young woman, depending on what sport it is, they can't get to the spot that they want to get? They've gotten some bad advice and their career is ruined. That's what you're going to see with a lot of these young men and women as the transfer portal across all sports goes ahead. But football specifically, I think is going to be somewhere where the smart teams, the LSUs, the Alabamas, the Georgia are going to use it strategically. And then it's also going to be a situation where like Auburn this year, Tennessee, teams that need a life saver thrown to them are going to try to say, okay, just give me every person I can find in the portal and we'll take them on, whether they've got, drug charges, whatever.
Hey, you working at the Waffle House, you're in the portal. Okay, come on.
So, right. It doesn't matter. There's some teams that are going to say take all comers, and there's some teams that are going to be the contenders year in and year out who are going to use it very strategically. And I think LSU will be one of those programs.
Dude, you've been fantastic. I'm glad you came on. I'm sorry we weren't able to get you on the first time. It was chaotic. It was just going crazy. Dude, it literally has rained. It literally rained then like it is now. And you can ask the people in Louisiana. It rained like 72 days straight. Like I felt like my name should have been Noah, right? Like, I mean,
there you go.
It was nuts. Dude, we got to bring you back on. You were fantastic. Tell everybody where they can catch all of your great stuff.
Yeah, my personal Twitter handle at bgilmer18 on Twitter, and then you can follow my show. It's called Recruiting Every Second. I do all of the major updates and things like that on SEC football recruiting. I'm also a writer for UGAsports.com, the Rivals Georgia website, and I work closely with people over there at Tiger Details and stuff like that. So share a lot of stuff back and forth. There's often a lot of overlap. So you can follow my show on Twitter and Instagram using @recruiting_SEC. And I'd love to have you listen.
Absolutely, man. You've been fantastic. Thank you again. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Blake. I appreciate it.
No problem, brother. That is Blayne Gilmer. Guys, that was good. That was some good stuff. That was some really good stuff. I'm going to answer this one. I